to describe the experience.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add that the other ingredient, the vine, contains chemicals that switch off that enzyme in our stomach. And part of the mystery is how the shamans of the Amazon, out of 150,000 different species of plants and trees, ever managed to find these two plants that put together will give us a 4-hour journey into supernatural realms. And that is what the experience of ayahuasca is. An extraordinary storm of visions is unleashed behind your eyes. You find yourself leaving this world behind and moving on a journey into a seamlessly convincing parallel universe, a universe that is inhabited by intelligent beings. And indeed, one being in particular, who almost everybody who drinks ayahuasca, it doesn't matter where they come from. They may come from a great city in the West. They might come from the Amazon jungle. They will meet this being. She is always recognized as a female spirit. And she is the spirit of ayahuasca itself. And very frequently, most frequently of all, she takes the form of a gigantic snake, a serpent. Sometimes she takes the form of a human form as a beautiful woman. Sometimes of a mass of serpents. She conveys messages to you, messages of deep concern with the environment, messages of the fragility of the planet on which we live, of the fragility of the human adventure on this planet. Everybody who drinks ayahuasca will meet this being and sense that we are dealing with a loving entity here which holds the planet in her coils and exists to protect and preserve this planet, but at the same time has the time to pay attention to individual human lives, to enter into contact with individuals, to teach them. Professor Benny Shannon, he's the professor of psychology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Benny has drunk ayahuasca more than 300 times. That's a lot more than I've drunk it. I've drunk it 25 times. He's compiled the experiences of hundreds of people around the world who have drunk ayahuasca, and all of them speak of it as a teacher. It's like entering a school where you start to learn lessons that will transform your life. You examine your own behavior, the minutiae of your own behavior, how you act towards other people, how you may sometimes be cruel or unkind or thoughtless towards others. You're shown the truth about yourself in a very clear way, and you're given the opportunity to change yourself. And if you don't change yourself, the next time you drink ayahuasca, you will be shown those truths again, very clearly and very painfully. And this has happened to me again and again in my ayahuasca experiences. And I like to think, although it's a difficult process to change a lifetime of bad habits, that ayahuasca has set me on a journey to improve myself, to make me a better person, to make me more loving and caring towards my fellow human beings, and which has greatly heightened my sense of the environment, of what is happening to the earth today, of the horror that is being unleashed in the Amazon. It's made me care about these things in ways that I never did before. And most important of all, it's absolutely convinced me that our consciousness is not simply an artifact of our brains, generated accidentally by our brains as we go about our material business, that our consciousness is immortal, that we lived before we came into this life, that we will continue to live after we die in these physical bodies, that there are realms beyond our own, dimensions beyond our own, that they're all around us all the time, so close to us that they interpenetrate us, and yet normally we don't access them, we don't see them, and that's because of our state of consciousness.
So I think Graham Hancock's description there is absolutely expert, you know, the level of detail he goes into, and I think Graham Hancock, the way he approaches things, I have a very high level of respect for, because he actually went to drink the ayahuasca and he experienced it. It makes you sick, this stuff, when you drink it, and it's very uncomfortable to drink it. But he went and actually experienced it. For his other books as well, he's written other books called The Underworld. He actually went and scuba dived all around the world to find these underwater structures, you know, and he actually went and did it. He didn't just listen to what other people had said or done or read their books. He went and did it. So I have a very high level of respect for him, and I think what he said there is really quite crucial. And I think it was also interesting that the experience where he describes, you know, he says you take the drink and you get shown certain truths about yourselves, and then if you don't fix those, you take it again and you get shown the same things again. I mean, to me, that's just like Judgment Day, isn't it? You know, in the Christian or Catholic context, it's exactly the same type of process. really. But yet you're not, you're doing it through a consciousness-altering process. You're not doing it through praying to God, this external thing that doesn't have anything to do with anything. So let's go on to the... Right, so, and this brings us on to this fellow. I'm also going to play a clip from this fellow, Ron Wheelock, and I've got a note to add to this as well. So, see, he's also... Basically what's been happening is, just to preface this slightly, now in the last few years, ayahuasca tourism has become quite a big thing. And you can go to Peru and places and say, I want to take the ayahuasca, please, can you sort it out for me? And you're allowed to take it in those countries. You're not going to get into any legal trouble because you are allowed to take it in those countries where it's part of their tradition. And this Ron Wheelock, well, I think you'll hear what he says.
All right. Well, you both would understand the Western mind would have trouble wrapping itself around this, especially, Ron, you're saying that you communicate with the spirit world, that there are those who would accept their spirits, but they would only accept certain kinds based on their own religious beliefs. So tell me basically what you do, who these spirits are, what the nature of your communication is, and how you benefit people like Victoria and others.
Well, communicate with the spirit world, it's if I have certain questions or working with other people who have illnesses or seeking something in their life, usually I set my intentions. I say a prayer. I ask that they come, they teach me or tell me what to do. And I never know in what they come in usually human form, and many times they come and speak to me just like in everyday life, but and many times much clearer.
Meaning without drinking ayahuasca or any other concoction.
It's normally when we drink ayahuasca.
And what are they saying? What's the nature of the interaction?
Like if I'm doing a healing on a patient that's sick. I work on the person. If they need to take a certain plant, then the spirits advise me what plants they should take and what kind of a diet and for how long they should follow this.
And do you always?
Let me say that during a ceremony, you look towards the shaman in case you're having a problem. And in most ceremonies I've been in, there's always been the need for the shaman there. And even though he's been drinking, he then must serve the group. He's the one that comes to help if somebody is having a problem. And in Ron's case, I felt him and saw him transform. He's being much too modest with you. You can see how he actually transitions into a facilitator of the spirit working through him.
Transform meaning physically transform or what? How do you mean?
Well, Ron, what would you say? How would you answer that question?
Many times through the plant diets, one prepares their body for other spirits to work through us. And many times other spirits enter me and work through me. So yes, I'm there to help people through whatever problems they're dealing with.
All right, I want to get into the idea of
many times people, not so much physically, but when they're in the state of ayahuasca, and when they look at me, they see me in other forms.
Yes, and I've heard the spirit come through you. Your language changes, your voice changes, everything about you transforms. That's why I use the word transform.
Sure.
I'm not observing him as if he's on display. I'm in the ayahuasca ceremony and experience myself. That's why you need a shaman there, because I certainly couldn't move. If anyone needed help, I couldn't give it to them. So you look towards the shaman, and many times you see how he can help. You watch him help other people.
Yes, exactly. If the place of the shaman, when people enter into these states, if someone was at home doing this and entering into these bad states, there's no one to help them.
That's right.
They're completely lost. Many people are coming for a confirmation that there is more to life than what really meets the eye. Maybe a confirmation of God or something more spiritual. And there's many people that come with many illnesses. Cancer, for example. And I have seen people cured of cancer, but nothing's 100%.
Meaning you have cured people of cancer?
I had a lady many years ago that when I was with Don Augustine, she come with ovarian cancer. And Don Augustine said the reason I came was to cure her. And in a ceremony, me and a spirit entered her body and cured her.
And she's alive today?
She's alive today.
So, I mean, curing cancer, that's quite an achievement for somebody who, just gets people to drink this ayahuasca, or is with somebody at the time. So Ron Wheelock is basically an American guy. He's gone down to Peru to live there, and he guides other Americans who come there, because he can speak the language, through the ayahuasca experience. He's been doing that for quite a few years. Now, the other lady that you heard in that audio, it was one of these things that's really strange when this happens. I was researching and putting together this presentation basically from stuff I collected, as I said in the intro. But this Victoria is actually a lady called Victoria Alexander. And Victoria Alexander is Colonel John Alexander's wife. Colonel John Alexander was the person who went to visit John Hutchinson in 1983 with a team from Los Alamos National Laboratories, where they developed the A-bomb. So what is John Alexander's wife getting involved in all this stuff, and particularly Ron Wheelock? Why are these two appearing on Coast to Coast together when it seems like, well, we know really, don't we? Because John Alexander was involved in Operation Stargate, the remote viewing. So I reckon she's keeping an eye on him, on what he's doing, checking he's not going too far out of where they want him to be, or if they are, that they've got the information as to what he's up to. So the people that are running the planet, they know all about this stuff, or whoever they are. One of the things that we've touched on briefly with Anthony Peake was he talked about this idea of this zero-point field and consciousness arising or giving you access to information that was in the zero-point field. Now, really, there's been a lot of controversy over this in the years since this was first published, but there was a thought experiment which was published by Erwin Schrödinger in the mid-1930s, and it was to explain the wave function collapse in relation to large objects. He imagined what that means is that in quantum theory, they basically say that when you observe something, it changes the outcome of the experiment. So the moment that you observe something, it actually changes what you actually see and what the result is. And he actually proposed this thought experiment with a cat, where you've got a cat in a box, and then in the box next to it, you have a sort of little device which is operated by radioactive decay. In other words, each time there's a radioactive decay in an atom or a molecule, you can then, it gives off a particle, and then at some point, the hammer will fall, it will break a phial of poison gas, and the gas will then kill the cat. So, but it's a sealed box. The point is, it's a sealed box, you can't see inside it. You put the cat in, you put it in, you can't see inside it. Now, because the steel chamber is sealed, an observer cannot know whether or not an atom of radioactive material has decayed, and consequently cannot know whether the vial has been broken, the poison released, and the cat killed. According to quantum theory, since we cannot know the cat is both alive and dead for as long as the chamber is sealed, in a superposition of states, it is only when we open the chamber and observe the condition of the cat, thereby collapsing the wave function, that the superposition is lost and the cat becomes either dead or alive. So this paradox demonstrates that observation itself affects an outcome, as an outcome as such does not exist until it is observed, if you see what I mean. So in other words, until you actually observe something and bring it into your consciousness, it's not real. That's essentially what this is saying. And this is, this sort of extends into something called the anthropic principle as well in cosmology. So I've got a little video clip about this as well.
Imagine a universe where time moves forwards and backwards, where you can be in two places at the same time, where simply looking at something changes everything. Imagine a universe where you create the reality you experience. Now, imagine that you are there in that very strange universe, because the truth is, you are the observer. You create the reality. Welcome to the Observer Effect.
If you want to see fear in a quantum physicist's eyes, just mention the words, the measurement problem. The measurement problem is this: an atom only appears in a particular place if you measure it. In other words, an atom is spread out all over the place until a conscious observer decides to look at it. So the act of measurement, or observation, creates the entire universe.
I wrote a book on special relativity with an appendix which I devoted to perception, and I said that there was an analogy between perception and the way relativity treated things, that you couldn't, according to relativity, everything was related to the way that you interacted with it to observe it, you see, and also according to quantum mechanics. Right?
What is real depends on whether I look and the way I look. And now this is not just a philosophical question. We can see this in experiment.
Scientifically, we call it quantum measurement theory, and the ultimate inseparability of the observer from the observed.
The Copenhagen interpretation basically means that reality is unset jello.
Copenhagen was the place where Niels Bohr was born and where he set up his own institution. And Bohr was flabbergasted by this recognition that everything was possibilities, probabilities flowing and gooeying all over the place until an observer observes and then things come into being.
This means that deeply enough, and you dive down into the nature of matter, everything we know about the everyday world dissolves. There are no objects anymore. There are only relationships. There's no locality anymore.
The meaning of quantum physics is really in terms of giving us a new worldview that shows clearly how consciousness can be and is the ground of our being. In other words, quantum physics enables us to see directly that we can make sense of the world only if we base the world on consciousness.
There is something that we can do in our lives, literally influence the physical reality of our world, and that changes everything. It changes everything.
I think if we keep quantum physics and the understanding very simple for the layperson, that our observation has a direct effect on our world. I think if we keep it very simple, then people can get about the business of beginning to practice the skill of observation.
Everything starts from inside and then goes outside. So you are not pulling things from outside, you are really putting things outside from inside. It is very easy.
So you can see that even in science, people are starting to say that us observing reality changes it. We create our own reality. You've said a few of them saying similar things. I think probably 9, 10 different people saying very similar things there, really, with some subtle differences. So one might argue that consciousness is affecting what is observed. Okay. Now I think probably what we'll do is, we're at 9:05 now, so I think if we have a break, then we'll come back and we'll look at a clip from Dr. Gary Schwartz, or I'll either just go through his research a bit, because it's quite a long clip. But I think if we have a break at this point, you can have a cup of tea and whatever, and maybe come back in about 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Thank you very much, Rob. Thanks very much. Right, well, we'll carry on with this. Basically, what Dr. Gary Schwartz describes here is his attempts to try and do scientific experiments with the interaction of disembodied spirits. And what he basically presented in June 2010 in Explore, which is the Journal of Science and Healing, he had a paper entitled, and you can go and read this paper on his website, Possible Application of Silicon Photomultiplier Technology to Detect the Presence of Spirit and Intention, 3 proof-of-concept experiments.
Science is creating new technologies to make it possible to detect the tiniest amount of energy. So, for example, and again we'll talk about this, there's a device called the silicon photomultiplier system, which detects single photons of light in utter pitch darkness, and you can track them precisely. And anyway, and using this kind of technology, with the latest solid-state physics and the latest in circuitry and the latest in computers, we can actually use this to not only detect the presence of spirit, that is, collaborating spirit from the other side, what we now call our sacred promise team, but also these devices have the promise, and we'll get to that at some point about the soul phone, to be actually converted into technology. Sometimes you have to go into the dark in order to see the light. Sometimes you have to go into the dark in order to see the light. And that's what we're doing now with contemporary technology. And that's also what people do when they meditate, and when people go into trances. One of the devices that we used, by the way, was the silicon photomultiplier system. And in the experiment 2 of the paper that was published in this journal, that paper included 2 specific alleged spirits. One, HHH, hypothesized Harry Houdini, and the other was this alleged angel. And the angel, the alleged angel, actually did even better than Harry.
Huh.
And in subsequent research, which it will be coming up very shortly, which is probably the most extraordinary research I've ever done in my entire academic career, which now spans a very long period of time. Let me explain that, and your listeners, I think, will really appreciate this. Most of the time when we do research, somebody is interacting with the equipment. There's a physical person present. So I could be doing an experiment, for example, or my research assistant could be doing an experiment, whoever. And the problem is, how do you know whatever you get, whether it's somehow the mind or the energy of the experimenter, and not the energy, for example, of the alleged spirit? It's always a problem. Well, if this device this equipment is like, let's say, a cell phone, you don't have to pick up your cell phone for the cell phone to ring. You can have the ringer off. The voicemail will take the message whether you take the call or not. If there's a real caller calling, you don't even have to know that the caller is calling. So the idea occurred to me, well, if this is true, if the angel is really showing up, or if Harry's really showing up, as 2 examples, and they're really working with us, or Susie, whoever the beings are, then theoretically, if they're really made a sacred promise to participate in this research, they should be able to come into the laboratory in the evening when nobody's present, follow instructions provided by PowerPoint, visual and auditory, mimicking or modeling what a live experimenter would do, and they should be able to produce the same results, even when no human being is present, when no human being knows when the computer has started, because the computer, it starts at a fixed time, let's say at 11 p.m., which is coincidental since we're started here at 11 p.m. Pacific Coast time, and the computer then randomly picks a number to when it's actually going to start the PowerPoint. So no human being ever knows when the experiment is going to officially begin. Meanwhile, these beings, like the angel, have been instructed toward the end of the day with a script, a very warm, loving script, reminding them there's an experiment tonight and they promise to show up. We're treating them with respect, like we would, because we're doing sacred research. And then eventually the PowerPoint comes on, and it will say, for example, a welcome angel, thank you for showing up, and as you know, in the past, the first part of the data, don't go into the chamber. Just stay away. We're collecting baseline. And in this case, we'd be using what's called a low-light CCD camera, cooled to minus 77 degrees centigrade, which is very cold, looking into a pitch-black environment and detecting, literally imaging, getting a two-dimensional picture of the background light. And then it would say, okay, Angel, now please go into the chamber, and for the next half hour, please stay there and let your light glow while the camera collects the data, and we'll tell you when it's done. And then, of course, we'll collect the post-baseline, and then they'll be thanked and asked to leave. And what we did was we had this particular angel invited. On some of the trials, the angel would be invited, and on other of the trials, a deceased person would be invited. We were interested, could we detect both, and was there a difference? And then the next morning, the research assistant would come back into the room, and the data would be collected, at which point then we would analyze the data. So remember, there's no human being present. Now, if this really is spirit, we should get the same results, whether the experimenter was running the experiment, physically present, or not. And much to my absolute amazement, and we have a paper that's coming out momentarily in a peer-reviewed journal about this, I ran the experiment 3 times after we had done all this pilot research, and we got continued positive results. And the interesting thing was the angelic presence was consistently producing a bigger effect than the non-angel spirit. And this was not with the computer. This was with the experimenter present. I asked my research assistant to invite an angel, particular angel, to come into the laboratory. So, we'd get a baseline for a half hour, and then he would invite this angel for a half hour, and then we get another baseline. So you get the intervention, the spirit presence alleged, and then the post, okay? Now, you have to understand that, I'm explaining, is that in this very first experiment, it's a pitch-black chamber in a pitch-black room. It's completely dark. And in there, we had like a chessboard, kind of checkerboard background that the camera was focused on. And this is the kind of camera, by the way, that these telescopes use to look out into deep space. Our camera costs $40,000. Giving you the introduction to all of this. And everything points to the fact that we can literally measure the presence of what appear to be angelic beings, and we can discriminate them from the typical deceased. All right? They're different. Again, you'll get the details by reading the papers. So, sacred promise, possibility here. Multiple mediums have told me that there are, I call them alleged angels, hypothesized angels, and they're as eager to participate in this research as Harry Houdini or Albert Einstein or Susie Smith or Marsha Eklund, that if there is this greater spiritual reality, it's up to them. People ask me the question, they say, Dr. Schwartz, are you trying to prove that a greater spiritual reality exists, be it deceased people or angels or the source? And I say, absolutely not. What I'm trying to do is to give them, if they exist, the opportunity to prove themselves.
So he's claiming that he's able to invite spirits to interact with his equipment under controlled conditions, and he's able to detect those interactions. That's what his paper is about. And he's written this up in a book called The Sacred Promise. Now, of course, he's the first one to say, well, a lot of people in the scientific community think I'm just nuts doing this. But, what he's actually, the way he's done it is very interesting. And the fact that he's trying to break the borders between science and this idea that we have got disembodied consciousnesses floating around us and being able to interact with us. He's trying to prove that scientifically. Now, of course, some people again will say, well, why is he doing that? We know that that's what happens. We know that this is real. But he's actually, probably the only person that's trying to design and build physical experiments to measure this. And that's why it's interesting to find out about. And you can go onto his website, drgaryschwartz.com, to find out all about that. And he also did a recent experiment with a hypothesized Harry Houdini. And he says, in his paper, he calls it HHH, but in his oral discussion, he says that he thinks this was actually the spirit of Harry Houdini, and he goes into some detail as to why he thinks it was specifically the spirit of Harry Houdini. So it's very interesting. Now, I first came across Gary Schwartz a few years ago because he did some experiments with a chap called Chris Robinson, a psychic, and what he did in that experiment was, Chris Robinson, the night before he went out with Gary Schwartz the next day, he had to dream where he was going to go to the next day. and write down a description in a notebook. So he would have a dream, he'd wake up in the morning, he'd write down what he dreamt, and then Gary Schwartz would take him to a location which was chosen from a random set of envelopes, and then they would see what was at that location, like a museum, or I think one time they went to a sculptor's site, and that also is very interesting. And they got a positive result. In other words, Chris Robinson, I think 6 out of the 7 days or something, was able to accurately describe where they went to the next day from having dreamt it the previous evening. So we're now going to take a look at idiot savants, because this is another thing that's difficult to explain in medicine. It's a well-known phenomenon that happens to people, but it seems like somehow they're tapping into a consciousness field to perform these extraordinary feats of memory, and as you'll see here, I'm going to just play the video clip just for 5 or 10 minutes.
The Public Library in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's often said that the mind works in mysterious ways. In the case of 55-year-old Kim Peek, this is truer than most. He's the world's most famous savant, a confounding mix of mental disability and brilliance.
My zip code, where I used to live, was 10003. Where is that apartment?
Lower East Side. Lower East Side.
My office is at 30303. Where is that?
Atlanta.
Kim's remarkable brain became the real-life inspiration for the character of Raymond Babbitt in the movie Rain Man.
Sally Dibbs, Sally. 461-0192.
How did you know my phone number?
How'd you know that? Said read the telephone book last night. Dibbs, Sally. 461-0192.
It's a role that earned Dustin Hoffman an Oscar and brought worldwide attention to the phenomenon of the so-called idiot savant.
Dustin walked up to Kim after he'd spent about 6 hours with us in Hollywood, and he touched noses with him, and he says, "Kim, I may be the star, but you're the heavens."
I was born on March the 9th, 1962.
It's a Friday.
Kim was born with severe brain damage, but with his disability came an astonishing gift, a photographic memory. Like other savants, the mechanism of his condition is poorly understood.
Kim's brain, no left brain, no right brain. He has one hemisphere, doesn't have any separation, and total absence to the corpus callosum, which has to be a filtering system. And he has no filtering system, so instead of 45% to 50% that yours and my brain keeps, he keeps in about 98%.
Against all the odds, Kim Peek learnt to read. Books and the unquenchable thirst for knowledge came to dominate his world.
Last president of the Soviet Union was who?
Gorbachev.
Longest serving leader of the Soviet
Stalin.
Union. Oh, this is hard. Identify the famous son of Pepin the Short.
Carloman.
The City Library is Kim Peek's second home, and for good reason. He's already read about 9,000 books. Luckily, the library has 600,000, so it should keep him busy for some time to come.
Five years ago, we met an 8-year-old boy named Rex, who seemed to embody in one small person some of the most intriguing mysteries of the human mind. How it is that stunning ability and profound disability can coexist in the same person. Rex was born blind with brain damage so severe, his mother Kathleen was told he may never walk, talk, or do much of anything. And yet he has talent beyond anything most of us can imagine. We were so captivated by Rex that we decided to follow him, to keep coming back to see what the years would bring. The last time we visited Rex and his mom, he was 10. Today, he's 13 and as joyful as ever. But before you meet Rex today, meet Rex as we first did.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi,
Hi, Rex. How are you?
I'm fine, and how are you, Leslie? Hi.
Rex Lewis Clack then, as now, was a study in contrast.
Can we shake hands?
Yes.
Blind and full of enthusiasm,
It's good to see you, Leslie.
yet unable to dress himself or even carry on a basic conversation.
Leslie?
Yes?
I did a wonderful job standing on the carpet.
But with everything Rex couldn't do, he could do this. We played him a song he had never heard, with his old piano teacher singing along.
To San Jose.
Remember, he can't see the keys. Rex is a musical savant, one of a handful of people in the world who share a mysterious combination of blindness, mental disability, and musical genius.
Good job.
Amazing.
But away from the piano, well, look. He was easily upset, confused by basic concepts.
What shape do you think that is?
A circle.
And unable to find his way around the apartment he lived in his whole life.
Let's find the toy box.
Music seemed to be Rex's only real connection to the world, to normalcy. And the question was how far it could take him. Well, here he is 5 years later at 13, playing Debussy for audiences around the country. He's grown more than a foot since we saw him last, and his technique on the piano has improved dramatically. But the answer to how far Rex has come is more complex, like the savant mystery itself.
Look who's there. Oh my God.
Rex greeted me with the same warmth and enthusiasm as ever.
Can I give you a big hug? Oh my God. Rex.
But he seemed to forget that I already knew his mother.
How long are we going to hug? This is your mom, Kathleen. I know your mom.
Seen her in a few years.
How are you? Good.
Okay, are you ready to learn your new song?
Yes.
Rex still has the magical ability to hear a piece of music one time and retain it. And he's taking that into a whole new realm, singing. We watched as Rex's voice teacher, Angela Rasmussen, sang him a song he'd never heard before, Schubert's Ave Maria, in Latin. We thought the song was upsetting Rex, since he plugged his ears and started making noises.
What do you think?
I think that's great.
We were wrong.
So he now is singing in Latin.
That's Rex. It's so automatic, almost. It's like breathing for him.
So that's just an example, I think. Obviously, one of the people that have studied this is when the brain becomes damaged that some of these things actually come to the surface. And it's almost as if somebody like, particularly with Rex, well, both of them, but particularly with Rex, because most of his brain has sort of been shut down, or a good proportion of it, through the bit that's actually working, he can access this ability, it's like he can access this knowledge of how to play the piano or how to sing, and just do it just like that, without, each of us would have to practice for weeks and weeks and